things among the biota. We'll do competition first. And we're doing that one first because it can be within a species as well as between species. And the other relationships are all between species rather than both. You can compete with something else that you're the same species of, right? Is it possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you give me examples?
Sports.
All right, so you can compete at sports with someone of your species. For food.
Black Friday deals.
Black Friday deals. Apparently sometimes that gets violent.
Yeah, I have a bruise on my thigh. Some lady threw me.
For a mate.
You can compete for a mate. You guys don't compete for mates yet, right?
Me and Daniel are in big war right now.
Yeah. Stop it. I'm gonna reward.
You guys don't compete for mates yet, right?
Just say no. We like to say no,
whoever
but
dies,
there's always that.
Spending it all for the stick.
This is the most helpful piece of advice I have for you.
I color them with highlighter. Too close. Yeah, a little bit too close together.
Here's my advice from one old person to a room full of not old people. My friends, gentlemen, cover your ears. Gentlemen, cover your ears.
Andrew.
Keep them uncovered.
Gentlemen, cover your
You guys
ears.
are so bad at listening.
Are all of your ears covered?
Yeah, barely.
Hey, they're not covered if you said yes. They have cooties.
Wow, that's a lie.
Ladies, cover your ears. Ladies, cover your ears.
I wash regularly. I was attacked in the
They have cooties. That is my advice of the day.
Although Andrew's just like, yeah, I know. Yeah, it happens.
Truth be told, though, in biological communities, there is certainly competition for mates. We don't have to worry about that here. We don't have to worry about that certainly yet. Just so you know, in my head, none of you are dating.
Oh, yeah.
In my head, none of the juniors and seniors or sophomores are dating either. You are all independent little beings figuring out who you are and what you are and not trifling with the other ones because you all have cooties.
I'm a real boy. You are a boy, you're right.
It's also why I keep my distance because I'm fairly certain you all do have cooties.
You know, some of them really won't.
So what is it technically?
No, they're not.
No, not like that.
No, no. Mm-mm.
Too far.
Too far.
He goes like,
So,
I just know I have.
competition for mates, competition for food, competition for resources, those all occur within a species, between members of the same species. Much like I think it was Coach P yesterday, he said something about competition for so many spots on a basketball team, right? There's only so many spots, and there are so many people trying out for something.
You make it.
I wouldn't make varsity of that.
I made it more.
I broke my own ankles the other day.
You shot me to the other.
Stay humble.
Competition between species. Competition between species is, well, kind of similar in certain ways. You can compete between species for food. If you both eat the same food, you're competing between species. For a place to live, some species, right, they occupy the same particular niche even though they're different species. Different species don't tend to compete with each other for mates. That would be unusual.
It's like a freshman day when senior.
Giraffe, my dial.
That'd be gross.
So yeah, there's not so much competition for mates between species. Most often it is for a limited amount of resources. So most often competition between species occurs for a limited amount of resources. There's a finite amount of food available, a fixed amount, right? So there's a finite amount of food, there are a finite amount of places to live. Add humans into that whole mix, and then we end up with stuff like habitat destruction, and that just makes it even worse because there's even fewer places to live. Competition does not always result in the death of an organism, of course, but it is a lose-lose for both involved parties. Competition, especially over a finite number of resources, if you are a European starling and you eat grubs, and a mole eats grubs, you are competing for the same amount of food. If a mole eats grubs, there are fewer for the starlings. If starlings eat the grubs, there are fewer for the moles. It's a lose-lose. There are certain ways that they work their way around it. Moles are nocturnal. Starlings are diurnal. So they will adjust their behaviors, like being awake at night versus during the daytime, to be able to mitigate the effects of competition. But sometimes you're just not able to adjust your behaviors.
Is it like always lose-lose situation? Or can there be times when it's not like at all, like when it's a win-win?
Win-win as far as competition. No win-wins in competition. The only time that it could potentially be a win-lose in competition would be competition for a mate. If one of the competing animals or organisms gets the mate and the other does not, it's a win for the one who gets the mate, and it's a loss for the one who does not. But then, in the case of the praying mantis, it was a win for the one who got the mate, but then he got eaten anyway, so lose.
Yeah, the female after they give
It isn't entirely true. They do eat their mates.
You can learn that at Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah, I would do more.
Hey, they're very pretty. I like mantids.
Like, how is there a lose-lose for food again?
Because there's a limited amount of food, and it would be a win if you had an unlimited amount of food. So if somebody's eating some of your limited amount of food, so say last hour I kvetched for pretty much the whole hour about not having snacks. Somebody really should have brought a snack. It was inconsiderate of them to show up without snacks.
Anyone who wants to give me money,
And-
go to the vending machine.
If, say, one of my students last hour did have a snack, and if we were both competing for said snack, we would have to share the snack. And that's just a lose, because who shares?
Why don't you just take it? Liam shares every time with me.
I'm pretty sure it's poor form for a teacher to just, like, take food out of the mouths of the youths.
This whole book. This is our hand. You're gonna eat.
And now, at this point, I'm going to go for a run after school anyway, so it's too close to when I'm going to run to eat a snack anyway, so I just...
I'll run with you. Kidding.
Yeah.
How many miles a day?
Probably, well, it's cold out. Well, but it's sunny. Maybe only 3, maybe 6. Depends how I feel like. Yes.
You run in the winter? When it snows?
Why not? Yeah.
I prefer cold, I don't feel it behind my legs.
I prefer 48.
Yeah.
48, that's the sweet spot. 48, where if you run, you warm up enough, but it's not so cold that you're just cold the whole time. It's a good temperature.
So, like, if you wake up and it's 48 degrees, you're like, oh, it's the best day in the world.
Oh, that's when I'm going to go run, yeah.
Wait, what time do you wake up to go run?
I usually run after school during work. On the weekends, I just wake up when I would normally wake up to go to work. So 5:08 is when my alarm goes off.
Wake up at 5:08 every day.
And you're able to run at that time? Are you so cute? I would think you were great.
It's a chosen disposition.
What time do you go to bed?
11.
Did it take like an hour to get done?
Yeah, I think about the dose.
About a half hour.
Yeah.
All right.
I got a 14 hours, 6 hours of sleep.
There you go. Right there. This, we don't use the following vocabulary word to refer to this relationship. Symbiosis, where sim means together, right? Bio, as always,
Best class. What?
means living.
Spanish, so it's
So, symbiosis describes the relationship between organisms that live together within the same or within the same geographic location, also known as a community, right? But a symbiosis, I want you to be clear that usually this also does not result in death. So symbiosis is not a relationship that results in death.
What does this mean?
Together with,
So what is it
cis
again?
is with.
It's
A relationship that describes two different species that live together in the same geographic area. Now notice I said two different species. A symbiosis does not describe interactions within one species. It's between two different species.
That live in the same area?
Yeah, that live in the same geographic area. So it does not describe relationships within a species, but rather between two different species. All right. My favorite, whenever people say hippo, my favorite moment of thinking of hippos, hippos are not the most agile of animals, unless they're swimming. When they swim, they're sorta graceful. But that whole like Fantasia hippo in tutus thing, my favorite hippo moment was at the Detroit Zoo. A hippo was like laying there on the grass and a squirrel was bounding through its habitat and apparently didn't recognize the hippo was alive and like jumped on the hippo, and the hippo did not look happy about being sat upon by a squirrel. I was like, really? It's not bothering you. It's a squirrel. But that hippo shot up with like all of the speed that something that weighs a ton can stand up with. It's pretty funny.
Did it eat the squirrel?
It did not eat the squirrel. It just kind of like stood up, and then the squirrel freaked out and ran.
It should have gotten the squirrel.
There is a relationship. We'll look at a few different ones. We'll start with why not. The table we're about to make is called a pairwise interaction table. A pairwise interaction table. And a pairwise interaction table allows us to put two different species in the same table and then describe the relationship between them. And when we draw a pairwise interaction table, we describe that relationship in terms of pluses and minuses. This first relationship we're going to talk about is a plus-plus. It's a win for both species, and we'll talk about a rhinoceros. The relationship that is positive for one species but neutral for the other. Some biologists argue that a true version of this relationship is actually impossible. No way to have it. It's called a commensalism.